All right, welcome back to another episode of Persuasion by the Pint. I'm Jonathan Taylor, along with
Sean McCool.
And Sean, today we got, what are we drinking today? I'll let you say it.
We are drinking Dunkin' Coffee Porter, which is from Harpoon Brewery. It is a combination of two iconic beverage brands. I think is how they say it on their website. It's a coffee porter, and it is no doubt coffee. Like, it is very strong.
You can taste the coffee.
It's basically cold brew. Like, if you call beer a brew and you got coffee and you mix
it's like they took a cold brew and dumped some alcohol in it.
Yeah, it's a stout with cold brew dumped right in it. Which actually, there's a where we met this morning at Honeybee Coffee here locally. That's one thing. When I go in there in the afternoons, they also have about 8 beers on tap, and they'll do a shot of cold brew in your beer. So that's basically what this tastes like, is having a shot of cold brew right in your stout or porter. In this case, porter. Which I'm not. Do you know the difference between a porter and a stout? I'm going to show my ignorance for a show that has the word pint in it.
Sometimes when I grab what I think is a stout, I pick it up and then I read on there it's a porter. So to me...
So if you go to persuasionbythepint.com, this is episode 8.
Yep.
You can leave a comment about the difference between stouts and porters and educate us.
Please do. Because we don't claim to be brew experts. We just like drinking it.
Yeah. It's a good little bit of small talk before we actually get into the rest of the show. But you mentioned, to pivot to marketing, when you went into the store to look for our beverage of the day, that because of the Dunkin' colors, like, this really stuck out to you. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, immediately I was drawn to, because they always are bringing in something new. And this is from a local, liquor store down the road. I hate using liquor store because it sounds so seedy. Yeah, but it is a liquor store. Okay, I should say wine and spirits. But they have this huge walk-in cooler, and my eyes are drawn to, because I actually like Dunkin' coffee. I mean, I like good coffee, but to me, Dunkin' has a good coffee. So
I hate Dunkin' coffee, but
to each their own.
It seems like that's the thing, though. Like, people love Starbucks and hate Dunkin', or the opposite.
Yep.
Which is why there's both, and that's why we have a show, and then some other more credible Persuasion people have their own shows. So
and so I immediately, those colors, those are synonymous with Dunkin'. I mean, they're unique branding. Who has pink and orange, or I guess what you'd call
fuchsia,
fuchsia and orange. But immediately I say, that's Dunkin' colors, and then I'm looking at it, and so we were reading a little before the show, and apparently this is a new brew that Harpoon Brewery and Dunkin' have combined, and they've got this new brew for the fall. It's a limited brew, but it's just during the fall season.
So what you're saying is we're on the cutting edge.
We're on the cutting edge. Always.
Coffee, porter.
Absolutely.
Talking.
Dragon's Milk.
Dunkin'
Harpoon, Dunkin'
stuff.
Yeah.
So you can come here for persuasion, influence, and cutting edge beer.
We don't know the difference between a stout and a porter, but we think we're on cutting it. We think we're cutting edge, though.
They look the same.
So what are we talking about? We're continuing. I think this is our last final episode discussing the Forbidden Keys to Persuasion manual, which we highly recommend. Anyone that's
Blair Warren. We'll put a link in the show notes, which you can find at persuasionbythepint.com. But Blair Warren, as far as I can tell, I don't know if he's not writing anymore. I went to his website today, actually, before the show, to kind of do some stuff. And it's funny because, like, the title of his pages, or actually when I typed in his name, one of the Google search results was, I used to write, here's some of it. That was like his meta description for his website. So, like, the guy obviously doesn't really care to be known.
No, he doesn't.
And it's, but the the quality of this is incredible, and you can get the book. I think it's like $20 or something.
Yeah.
We don't make a penny off of it. We tried, but there's no affiliate.
there's no affiliate. Yeah, exactly. So, and I mean, he doesn't really promote it, so it was like digging deep to find this thing.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have known about it except for a friend, that said, check this out. So he doesn't, apparently he does really well in just writing alone because he's not.
Well, I mean, if you're good at it, it pays
Absolutely.
pretty well, that's for sure.
Right.
So, so we're going to talk about, in his manual, it's lesson 3, and we're just really we really are just skimming the highlights when we talk about this stuff, and we're kind of riffing off of it. Mm-hmm. There are so many good examples that he lays out in the book that really help you get the nuance of what he's talking about. Mm-hmm. That it really is worth, if you're into persuasion influence at all, whether it's writing copy and sales, if you've got your own products that you're marketing online or in person, you need to read this book. And we're just going to hit some highlights of it. So this is what he calls lesson 3 in the book. Mm-hmm. And I think the section of this is called it's something about
mechanics of mind control.
Yeah, the mechanics of cult mind control.
Yeah, cult mind control.
So we're going to kind of skip over the first one. So there's kind of 3 big things he talks about. One is isolation.
Yeah.
Another is gaslighting, and the third is psychological ventriloquism, which is a mouthful. So isolation is just what it sounds like.
Yeah.
And this doesn't apply to everyone because that's really a physical space, time and space type thing. Now, if you do live events, I know a lot of coaching type events, or, if you go to quote boot camps or whatever con type conference,
it's a tight group.
There's a very tight group. Everybody believes the same thing, and there's ways that you could take some of these principles. So if you have an event like that, there's some really cool stuff that you could be doing to magnify your persuasion and influence in those events.
Yeah,
I actually went to a coaching week 5-6 years ago. I guess it's been like 6 years ago, where he really used a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
From 6 in the morning, we were up at 6 in the morning doing PT, physical training, but he would take the phones at 6 and would not give them back until 10.
Yeah.
And just kept us totally away from our phones, kept us busy all day. Yeah. A lot of bonding events with the other people there, and that's really what this.
I was actually
about.
Thinking about your example that because you shared that. I don't know if it was on the podcast or I think it was off the podcast, but I was thinking about that when I was actually going through isolation about that, because then once you're outside of the group, it's like, they put like a wall around.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of, cults, a lot of youth groups and churches and just traditional Protestant churches get accused of that type of thing, or even, any of the Protestant denominations. I know I had friends who were outside of the church. I grew up in a pretty, active church, and we had a really active youth group, and I'd spent a lot of time there. And my parents would even accuse me from time to time of being brainwashed and things like that, because I spent so much time in a tight group. So,
so there's an underbelly, dark side to some of this. When we talk about isolation, there are some groups out there, and I know from people that have been in membership coaching groups, a lot of these, I've talked to friends in the past that have been through, whether it's personal development or speaking, and once you're out of the group, once you leave the group,
you're excommunicated.
Absolutely. It's like you're completely ostracized and excommunicated from. And no one's to have contact with you. Yeah. And if they find out, the group leader is like, what I think about a cult leader, in the sense that he's like, if anyone has contact with this person, you can forget about being part of it.
The Amish still use that. And a lot of people think that the reason the Amish haven't adopted electricity is less for the religious views and more for the isolation views.
Yeah.
And the elders in the group understand that.
Sure.
So they're just keeping it out as long as they can. Well, it's funny. My wife's from Amish country, and I know she listens to this show. I found out the hard way. She listens to this show.
Watch what you say.
Yes, and but she grew up in Amish country. She's not Amish, but she grew up in Amish country.
Right.
And it's funny because they're really pushing the boundaries of that. Like they can't drive cars and own cars, but they can ride in a car as long as they pay somebody else. Or they can't have electricity in their house, but a lot of their barns will have electricity.
Right.
Or they'll have a phone like on the telephone pole on the edge of the property, like on the other side of the property line.
Right.
That they can go answer and talk on, but they can't have one in the house.
Yeah.
You know,
They'll find all sorts of reasons.
All kinds of loophole stuff. So, but yeah, I mean, there is some good, like there is a time and a place for isolation, for, getting rid of distractions and things like that. And in my coaching business, when I do events, I do that. I take away some of the distractions so that you can focus on the core principles and things like that.
Yeah.
So you just have to be aware, like anything, it can be used for evil and for good. You can really intensify either direction. Yeah. And you just have to be careful.
Yeah.
But today what we're going to be talking about is gaslighting and then the psychological ventriloquism, which is just a lot of L's and other things to say.
So up until about 6 weeks ago, I had no idea what gaslighting was. And then my wife, my significant other, accused me of gaslighting. And I had to look it up because I said, what are you talking about? And so I
and then you get this book. And now you're
and then I got the book. Now I know.
Now it's like, oh, you think I was gaslighting before?
Yeah. Oh, baby, it's coming now.
I got to practice.
No,
but if I'm going to get accused, I might as well be good at it.
Yeah, and so what brought this about was that someone we know, and I won't, obviously we don't mention names, but someone we know, or a couple we know that's going through a divorce. One of the significant others has used gaslighting, and so relationships, this can be detrimental, and a lot of people will use this without even knowing. And, I found out, not really understanding that I can be using it. But what is gaslighting? And what's a quick summary of what?
Yeah. So I found a phrase that I think does it. So he gives a couple definitions. Also, before I give you the actual definition, that's an open loop, by the way.
Yeah.
So
we should end it now and say next episode we'll actually share with you.
So when we were talking about this earlier this morning, kind of we were meeting, doing some show talk and stuff like that. I looked up real quick gaslighting on Google, and then like Wikipedia or one of the dictionaries pops up, and I do the little thing where it drops down the word usage, and like there's this graph of usage over the last 250 years or whatever. And there was this huge spike at 1890 for gaslighting. I was like,
what the heck happened?
Like, what was going on then? Well, it turns out that was like literally like gas lights in the streets and stuff. It was apparently a huge controversy and of the devil, that we were using gas lights, gas street lights and stuff. So big controversy back in the day. That is not what this is. just so we go. Yeah. So it actually
15 years prior, we just had a major civil war for like 5 years. Millions of people died. But gas lights were like huge.
Big time. You can go in the Google Books section and see like all the stuff that comes up for it. It's pretty funny. But it actually goes back to a Hollywood film called Gaslight. Yeah. And there was a screenplay and that's what and there was one of the key things that the husband used in that movie was a gaslight that he would manipulate to make the wife think she was going crazy. Right. So that's basically where it comes from. But so he gives a couple definitions in this book, but then he has one that says, in other words, so that's where it's a good definition because he takes all the other stuff and he just says, in other words, gaslighting is what happens when others secretly try to make you doubt your ability to discern reality so that you'll come to trust their judgment more than your own. Right. And that's really what gaslighting is. It's you making someone doubt their beliefs so that you'll believe whatever they're pitching, selling, trying to say. And as everything else we've talked about, you can use this for good or for not so good. So that's the main definition.
I can think, I don't know about you, but I can think of way too many examples, after fully understanding this, how we're all susceptible to this. You go into, you're shopping for a car, you're going to a mechanic, people that don't know what, mechanic comes to mind because if you don't know about your car, if you don't know enough, and I think,
especially today's cars.
Yeah, exactly. And service, car repair service companies can really take advantage of people who, through guilt manipulation, you don't know, you haven't, changed your oil since 6,000 or 7,000 miles. What are you doing? Which in reality, you can probably, today's vehicles, you can probably go even, further than that. But, just a common guilt that people can put on people that don't know enough and use that to their advantage of saying, I really question what, if I don't know, this guy, the experts must know better than I do. So
right.
I got to rely on them to tell me what to do.
So he gives five components of gaslighting that he's kind of broken down. So let's go through those and we can kind of.
Yeah,
I think it'll be pretty obvious, how you could use this for good and how you could use this for not
evil.
So good, for evil.
Don't use it. Don't use it for evil.
Yeah, we don't endorse that. But really, what this is all about is making other people doubt their own thoughts so that they'll come to rely on yours. And like I said, you can use that for bad or for good.
Yeah.
So the first thing he talks about is repetitive questioning, and he gives a great example in the book where he's having dinner with a friend, and he just asked the guy, he's like, so where does spaghetti and what country does spaghetti and pizza originate in? The guy's like, oh, Italy. And he just basically just raises an eyebrow.
Words, yeah.
And really, and just shuts up and goes about the business, right?
Yeah.
And it puts just this seed of doubt. I mean, it's really what our whole, justice system is based on, when it's a jury trial, is reasonable doubt, right? I mean, that's what the defender is going for, is reasonable doubt.
Right.
So there's a lot of gaslighting that happens in courtrooms because you're just trying to create just enough doubt that people question what they're seeing.
Right.
So questions, and we talked about this in an earlier episode about asking questions as a way to get to people and communicate with people and making sure they feel understood and all the different things. But yeah, just asking very simple questions where you're not even asking for more information. You're just making them second guess themselves.
Yeah, right.
And again, you could do that for good, or no harm at all, really. Pizza, or, using his example of pizza and spaghetti, there's no harm in that one way or the other. Or you could use it in a very powerful way. Let's say you're in the weight loss business, and somebody says, I may write in copy, for instance, I might write, you may think that calories in, calories out is the way to lose weight. If you have, fewer calories going in and more going out, then you'll automatically lose weight. But is that really true? That one phrase is enough
to make you question everything.
To make well, I don't know, because I've tried that, and all these scenarios start ripping through your head so fast. I have tried, to reduce calories, and it seems like I always, either gain the weight back or it stops at some point, stops working. So maybe that's not right.
Right.
I mean, so it's really just throwing out that reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah. I used to have a client that was in he was actually a surgeon. He's a bariatric surgeon, and he used to use that same question, so to speak, when he's talking to people that automatically think that diet and weight loss, or weight loss through conventional diets, or simply sticking to an exercise program. He would question them on that, and he would go against that, and so he would ask them, do you think that's the conventional wisdom of diets, as restricting your calories, or going on these, fad, low carb diets are the right thing to do? He would use that question.
Yeah.
And, a lot of his patients or people that became his patients would, start to second guess, in the process, because it was always, in his sessions before they became a patient, there was a pre-qualifying. Obviously, there's a lot of things they have to go through, but that was one of the processes, getting them to fully question that whole paradigm of, weight loss through diet, low carb, exercise, because, and then he would follow that up with and after they question themselves, he would start, bringing them statistics after they were fully on board, or I guess after they were fully to the point where they weren't sure they could back up. So they were at the point where they were open to information. And that's where he would bring in information on, do you realize, there's majority of people that lose weight through, conventional diets or traditional diets end up gaining that weight back pretty quickly. I
have a friend who actually went through bariatric surgery, and he tells this joke. He's like, I've, whenever he's a speaker too. Yeah. And so one of his jokes is, I've lost, 1,200 pounds, and he's like, now it took me like 17 tries over, over, 10 years. Yeah. But I've lost 1,200 pounds. I gained it all back, but that was one of his jokes, but he had bariatric surgery. So he had all these beliefs too. But what you're talking about, like where his next step that he took that to, I think is kind of the next step that he talks about here, which is pointing out the invisible. Right. And the very first thing he says about pointing out the invisible is when someone makes us aware of something we feel we should have been aware of, we tend to wonder if there's anything else we're overlooking. Right. So in your example, he gets them open enough to start questioning, and then he points out this one little fact. Right. And here's a person who's probably, if they're at that point where they're even considering bariatric surgery, they've tried everything. Right. Right. So to all of a sudden see that there's something they didn't know. Right. They're like, oh my God, what else? Yeah. Maybe that's why I'm not. So, we go back to the scapegoat. We go back to all these other things, right? It's like, oh, he knows something I don't know. So all of a sudden there's this instant trust that is built because here's a person who, despite all my research, all my experience, I've never come across this one little fact. Sure. And those facts, they're not that hard to find. We were talking earlier about just in any given area of expertise and podcasting or writing copy or, running, any type of advertising. Yeah. The majority of the public doesn't know that. And to whoever's listening or watching this podcast, your expertise, it goes back to the secrets thing. There's a lot of stuff that you take for granted that is a secret to the majority of the population. Right. Absolutely. So it's pretty easy to point out the invisible in your niche, in your market, and get that trust really quick from people. Yeah. Yeah. And in his case, to follow up, he could use, again, going back to, the principles of influence, he could use social proof and, citing articles or studies that showed that people, like, for instance, people that so many of the contestants that were on The Biggest Loser, ended up gaining a lot of that weight back. Right. Like a year or two after the show, their body, they would just, they went through that tremendous discipline through that show to lose all that weight. But afterward, it would be back within a year, year and a half, 2 years. Yeah, I'm actually doing a lot of research right now on fasting. Yeah. Because I'm considering doing a longer fast. So I'm really getting into the science, and my copywriter brain's kicking in. I've ordered 4 or 5 books on Amazon about fasting and watching YouTube videos. And one guy that's kind of the guy in fasting is, I think it's Jason Fung, Dr. Jason Fung. And he does this great presentation. He starts out with The Biggest Loser people and how they all lost this massive amount of weight, just doing the calories in, calorie out thing. And then he shows graphs where they've all gained it back. And that's why they don't do reunion shows, which is kind of pointing out, pointing out the invisible, right? Yep. And then he goes into what, is point number 3, which is alluding to the mysterious, which is, so first he gets you to doubt. Right. And And then he gets, he points out the invisible and then the alluding to the mysterious. He starts talking about this, these chemical and biological things that happen in your body. And it's kind of a mysterious process that he starts talking about that really runs the show. And I mean, the video on YouTube, I'll see if I can find the link and we can put it here, but
sure.
Because it's a really masterful way that he kind of lays out his whole argument.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're into fasting or not, it's irrelevant because the way he lays it out in his talk is really, really good. But he alludes, and then he does a great just metaphor of how your body really works compared to calories in, calories out. And he shows the difference between what you think is going on and what's actually going on.
Right.
So you instantly get this trust with this guy because he's figured out this mysterious process and made it very simple.
Sure.
Using a great metaphor. So,
cool.
I'm not going to tell you what the metaphor is, so you can go watch the video there. So, but this phrase like really jumped out at me from Blair's book. It says, people who allude to the mysterious tend to become trusted translators in our lives. So whether it's the physical trainer at the gym that knows how to hit a certain muscle that you hadn't figured out how to hit with a certain movement. Arnold Schwarzenegger back in his day was known in bodybuilding for finding like new ways to hit new muscles, right? Like, the hammer curl as opposed to, a regular curl, or, just the whole twisting of it. So the muscles rotating as you twist. And I mean, he would find all kinds of just weird, unique angles to attack muscles with. And he became, very, very popular in the bodybuilding niche. So much so that he transcended popular culture. Yeah. And what was then pretty obscure niche.
It was.
Now I can imagine he'd be an Instagram.
Yeah.
If he was in his heyday now.
Right, I know.
Oh man, he'd be amazing. And he gives some examples. Gurus who claim to access esoteric wisdom. You think of the Wayne Dyers, the Dalai Lama, Deepak Chopra, Oprah even, right? They have this access to wisdom that we don't really understand. Right. And they've got the time to devote to it, so we give them our trust. Yeah. Because they have this insights, goes back to the secrets and the inside knowledge type thing. And then there's also, he talks in here about jargon, which you were kind of talking about earlier. Lawyers, doctors, they all have their own jargon.
Sure.
And
if we don't know the jargon, we're kind of on the outside.
Yeah, we have to trust them to guide us through that minefield of jargon. I was actually thinking when I was reading this and thinking about this episode, it's like when we were in the military, everything was acronyms. Yep. Like you could have a whole conversation without saying anything. It's all acronyms. Like the CO told the XO to take the GIs to do PT. It's like,
what the heck?
What?
Yeah.
So like everything was an acronym, but it was its own language. And if you were on the outside, or if you were a new guy, private,
you don't know what the heck they're talking about.
You kind of had to, you had to trust somebody else with that knowledge. So yeah, definitely
and you could take advantage of new recruits in the process of that.
Absolutely. Not that I did. Nobody would do that.
No one would do that, really.
But if you
like when I was a private, I was told to go get a box of grid squares.
Yes.
It's like, okay. So I went looking for.
Went to the supply officer. Yeah. And of course they're in on it.
Yeah, of course. Then they
send you need a form. Yeah. You need a form 1436. Yep. You need to get that from the first sergeant.
Oh, they send you from one point to the next point, and then the joke's on you. So it's like, okay, yeah. So there's a reality of knowing that when you're on the outside, when you don't know something, it does make you feel vulnerable. And here's the one thing that I pulled away, and I highlighted this in my notes. When someone makes us aware of something we feel we should have been aware of, we tend to wonder if there's anything else we're overlooking. So we start second guessing everything, else in our lives when someone points out, whoa, you messed up here, going back to that, army analogy, then you start second guessing. You become very vulnerable, to what people say to you.
And like we've talked about in every other show, every other episode, all this weaves together. So you can't lean strictly on one of these ideas and not take into account the others. So for instance, if you lean too heavily on that idea of pointing out what people don't know or things like that, but you leave out the need for people to be right, those can very quickly contradict each other, and you lose the power of either one.
Right.
So you if you're going to point something out, you got to do it strategically enough that it's not going to trigger their need to be right, but it does come across as helpful and in a serving way. So what's the next point?
Psychological ventriloquism.
Well, we got two more here real quick.
So, okay. All right.
Revealing the secret thoughts of others. And,
yes.
We'll do that one real quick. So this is interesting. There may be what he says. There may be no more powerful way to make sure your opinion impacts another person as to claim that others share the same opinion but are reluctant to admit it. Establish yourself as being the only one who cares enough to tell them the truth.
Right.
And this is like really, you see this in marketing very subtly. Again, we'll go back to the weight loss niche or, some of the fitness niche, I mean, it really is in a lot of different areas, but, hey, everybody around the office kind of thinks, you could do this in a corporate setting or wherever, everybody around the office thinks you're kind of rude, but they're afraid to tell you,
right?
Because I care and I want you to succeed.
Yeah. I'm here to help.
You're kind of coming across.
Yeah.
It's not you, but you're coming across to them as rude.
Right.
So now you've engendered this trust with them. And that's what a lot of these, these cult leaders do is they'll find something that maybe you're doing that nobody else is willing to tell you.
Sure.
And they'll package it up in just the right way so that it comes across as helpful and like, oh yeah, I can see why nobody else would tell me that. But you took a risk.
You've gained my trust completely because
you're willing to tell me what others won't. Right? It's like being the inside guy to a CEO, where everybody else is a yes man.
Right.
And you've got the one guy who will tell him straight, and he becomes that first lieutenant, that first, the main key advisor for the person. Right. In the Bible, there's examples of Joseph. To the king of Egypt or the Pharaoh of Egypt. He becomes an advisor because he tells him the truth about what his dreams mean. And
whereas his other advisors were telling him what
they thought he wanted to hear.
Exactly.
Keeping their job safe and everything else. So it's a way to get into. It's a really powerful tool for getting into someone's inner circle. Yeah. And and you can use it for good too. So the example he gave for good is his kid comes home, in the book, Blair Warren's example is his kid comes home from school, gets straight A's on his report card, and they tell he and his wife tell him how proud they are and all this stuff. Right. Then a couple days later, while he's tucking the kid in bed, he says, "Hey, by the way, I just want you to know I'm really proud of you. But did you know your mom's like telling all her friends how smart you are?"
Yeah. Right.
So now all of a sudden you're telling this person what other people are saying. Right. And it just builds their confidence in you. Yeah. And in the facts of what you're saying. So I thought that was a really good example. And then the last one is similar, which is gang up on them. And this is really just a form of social proof. Yeah. Is all it is. And again, you could use that for
very
good.
Powerful.
Yeah. You could use that for good or evil, but we probably don't need to go into that. But ganging up on people in a constructive way is basically social proof, which we talked about in other episodes, and we will continue to talk about quite often.
Which is, synonymous with, you think of all cults, there's a level of, I guess there's a degree of, influence that goes in from kind of pushing people or, people that gang up, there's an intimidation factor there that's like,
Well, you see it online all the time in social media groups. Yep. Especially if there's literally a group on social media, like on Facebook group, that if the majority of the group feels a certain way, they will ostracize and tear apart anybody that contradicts like the main thought of that group.
Yeah.
And instantly that person.
We think peer pressure just only happens in middle school and high school. Wrong completely. Okay.
That's just the training ground. Yeah. So if there's any kids listening to this, it gets much worse as you go out. Yep. It's different, but it's very much alive and well. All right. So lesson 4 was psychological ventriloquism.
Okay.
This is really subtle. This is this is not easy to talk about. Mm-mm. It is very, it's kind of an art form more than it's, he says in here, there's no formulas for this.
No.
Like it's a very practiced art form to be able to get this right. And when we talk about some of the people who do this, I think people will hear and see that that's true. So I'll let you run with it.
Yeah. So to understand this, let's go back to at the beginning, because I think he goes back to the beginning of when he starts out everything with the 3 tendencies of human behavior, and I'm going to rehash those. People resist unwelcome attempts to persuade them, especially in this day and age. People resist what they can't detect, or I'm sorry, let me restate that. People can't resist what they can't detect. And people sometimes believe what they are told, but never doubt what they conclude. So it's like, people are skeptical about what you tell them, but if you can allow them to come to their own conclusions on what you want them to, then it's a completely different matter.
To the end. Yeah.
So let's talk about some examples. Okay, so the top on this lesson we're talking about from this point, we're talking about psychological ventriloquism, and so when we do that, we're trying to, knowing that people are resistant against being told directly what they should know. People want to form their own conclusions. So as a marketer, if you're in business, you have to understand that this means that you have to, and we've talked about this on earlier episodes, but you have to shift the way a person sees things. It's almost like, using magic, to shift what they're seeing and understand that they are looking at something completely different. So let's use an example. And I mentioned an example before the show that I thought I would add on, but it's using advertorials. So advertorial, you click on and you see these prevalent all over the place today. Not just in print, but also online. So you're clicking a news site, you see a headline that looks like it's a legitimate news, and you click on it and you read it, and really it's basically an advertisement for something, and you don't realize it. So but a lot of people,
the 5 foods that you should never eat,
right?
If you want to gain muscle and lose weight, right. And it sounds like, that's a blog post, right? Because that's how a blog post would sound. And then, so you're automatically you're just thinking that
you've bought right in,
and it's then you find out as the article unwinds, it's a pitch for supplements,
absolutely,
or whatever,
right?
I think that. He talks too about, it's funny because the subhead of this is the secret of conjurers, con men, and comedians. So like, this is what, this is what con men use, mentalism. It's, when I got into copywriting, back in 2008, a couple of the first books I bought were actually some mentalism books. And, and I love that show, The Mentalist.
My wife watches that.
That was one of my favorite shows, and I was like, that's so cool to be able to do that, especially because he used it for good. He was a former con man who used it to solve crimes and stuff. And I always thought that was cool, and that's really what we're talking about, is being able to, psychological ventriloquism, instead of, putting your voice and making something else or someone else sound like they're saying something, it's psychological, so it's trying to get them, it's placing your thoughts into their head. So the movie Inception comes to mind.
Oh, that's a great movie.
Yeah, I love that movie.
Fantastic movie.
So many marketing lessons in there.
Yes.
I've always actually wanted at a live event to do like a movie night with that movie and like pause it and point out all this stuff. But that's really what we're talking about is an inception. Like, and what he talks about here is using comedians. Is comedians will they'll allow you to assume something, and then they'll turn it 180 degrees on you, right? Because they know what you're assuming, and they'll use that against you to make the joke funny. And the example he gives here,
it's actually funny.
So the joke is, my grandmother's been walking 3 miles a day every day for the last 5 years, and now we don't know where the hell she is. Right, because you're assuming, okay, here's mom. She's
working out. She's staying
working
healthy.
out, and then he switches it on you, right? And that's I actually took it, as you know, Jonathan. I took a stand-up comedy class last year. And that was one of the big tools of comedy. Is misdirection. You get people going in one way, and then you completely shift. That thought in a different direction. That's what makes it funny, because everybody knows they were thinking this, and then you
turned it on them.
Now, you can't trick people in advertising. Like, it doesn't work as well. Right? Because then you just piss people off instead of making them laugh. So, but that's a great example of the psychological ventriloquism.
From a visual standpoint, one of the examples he used in this was that, video with, talking about the guy that was given a confession.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah, isn't it? So they did basically a case study with a guy, or the video that's showing the guy who's been accused of a crime. He's in there. He finally gives his confession, but the video is of him alone, and not the interrogator, the guy that's interrogating him, asking him the questions.
He's off camera.
He's completely off camera. You can't see him, but he's giving that. And then you compare that with the one where they're completely both filmed in the same room, where he's asking the questions. And of the two, most people, when it shows him just giving his answers and the video shows him alone, they think that he is voluntarily giving that information, as opposed to when the video shows both the interrogator and the person that's being accused.
Right.
So that's
and the result was, so this was like, they showed these, they did a study and they tracked these over time, right? And it doubled the conviction rate. Of the exact same information. It doubled the conviction rate across all kinds of crime. Even if they told them, hey, what we're about to show you, studies say that you're more likely to convict this guy because you're just seeing him and not seeing the police officer or interrogator. And still, it doubled the conviction because of, for all kinds of reasons. But
they think they're just voluntarily deciding to.
You only see one side of the story, and all these assumptions come up in your head and things like that. And what he says right after that study is, he says, awareness of the potential problem assumptions play in our lives is not enough to counteract their effect. So what we're talking about with psychological ventriloquism is, by human nature, we have all these assumptions that we're always making all the time. And we're not even aware of them. And in fact, that's what makes them assumptions. Like, if we were aware of that we were making assumptions, they wouldn't be assumptions. But because we are making the assumption, it's just fact to us in the moment. Right? That's just how things are. Like, it's not an assumption, it's just how things are. And we can, and marketers and cult leaders and everybody else can use those well-known assumptions, because people tend to behave pretty much the same, and certain groups tend to have certain beliefs, and you can just kind of prey on those. But if you if you know your market really well and you know their pains, you can also use those assumptions about the fact that I'm never going to be able to lose weight. I'm genetically, my mom was fat, so I'm fat. Those types that you can use those to now break down the barriers and say, hey, it's not your genetics. And they're like, wait, how did he know I was thinking about genetics? And you can now use that to soften their skepticism and then give them good information. So That's
very good. Yep.
And like I said, this is so nuanced in this section that you could, you could camp out here for a long time as far as study. It's really hard to talk about, I think, but I think the thing you said earlier, people sometimes believe what they are told, but they never doubt what they conclude.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's what you have to realize is you could tell people whatever, but it's much more powerful to let them come to their own conclusion.
We could say we could tell you all day this is a fantastic beer.
Yeah.
But you're going to have to test it yourself, and that's why we have it on display here.
Or if, without physical proof, if it was a brand that you already trusted, you would make the assumption that it's probably pretty good.
Yeah. If you like Dunkin' Donuts coffee, you're probably going to like this.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why they do these brand partnerships. Yeah. Because there are, about half the population that drinks coffee is going to like Dunkin' and half's probably not, So, so how do you, where do you want to go from there? Because I could go in a couple different directions, but.
No, how do we, I guess when we wrap up this whole segment, I get a lot of takeaways from this. You can use, you look at gaslighting, you look at the psychological ventriloquism that we talked about. Obviously, you can use these, in a negative way, and you can probably, a lot of people can succeed in doing some shady things, and it's usually what I see is a short-lived, success in some of these things where you can utilize. But, if you want to do things the right way, I think, from gaslighting, gaslighting is always looked at such a negative light. Just that word alone conjures up a lot of negativity for me. Right. And it may be just because of the all the shots I've taken from my wife. But in reality, you can. I think there's a way to utilize a lot of these things in a positive light as a marketer, as a business owner, in your advertising or whatever you're trying to do. But understanding that, people in essence don't know everything, and you as an expert, in whatever field you're in, can utilize a lot of the information, understanding that you don't try to undermine or try to belittle people, but also make them understand that that they don't know about your field more than you do. Mm-hmm. Whether you're in the financial services industry, whether you're in the insurance industry, in the automotive, whatever industry you're in, if you're an expert in that industry, don't belittle people, but also understand that you're the expert. You're here to help them and benefit them in a way that, tries to say, I'm your advisor. You don't know this. I've been doing this for 20 years or so. Mm-hmm. And you haven't. Not to belittle what you do. You're good at what you do, but I'm also good at what I do. Right. And I can help you. Sean, you're good in coaching. You work with people. People need a coach. Statistics show that most people benefit from having a coach, a business coach, a life coach. They do, their success rate goes up. I don't know what the statistics are, but I know
it's astronomical.
It's astronomical, but it's a whole lot better, and anybody will tell you that. I don't care if it's athletics, business, whatever profession you're in, any athlete that is excelling at the highest level can tell you they can't do it. Even, you talk to NFL athletes and, guys that are working at the highest level, they have to have coaches. They have to have people.
Yeah, and if for no other reason, there's so much information that you just need a guide.
Right.
And that's what the expert is, a guide to just go through and sift and sort the massive amount of information. Like if I'm a health or fitness coach, there's so many studies and so many exercises and so many things coming out. You could never do them all. Right. So you need an advocate to come and decipher all the studies, the jargon,
bingo,
and be able to break it down for you and tell you, and give you the best of the best, the 20% that makes 80% of the difference that we talked about. So there's a couple things I had highlighted that I want to just kind of wrap up with. he's got them under the psychological ventriloquism. I think it applies to everything we've talked about so far. And what he said is this type of communication, he's talking about psychological ventriloquism. I'm saying it applies to everything.
Sure.
This type of communication doesn't originate in formulas, tricks, or strategy. It originates out of an increased awareness of human nature.
Yep.
And we've said that time and time again.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to apply this, he says there's basically 4 areas we need to concentrate on. Self-restraint, triggers of assumption, saying versus conveying information, and then exploring various examples of the concepts in action.
Right.
So just real quick, I know we're running short on time, but self-restraint, basically, I remember my first copy chief telling me the same thing, basically, and that is, don't be too direct, too blunt, or too matter of fact.
Right.
And my sales managers told me the same thing.
Right.
Like, you just can't come in the door, just telling people just blunt that they're doing it wrong.
Right.
All these things. So whether you're talking because you'll make them feel wrong, all these different reasons we've talked about. So don't be too direct, don't be too blunt, don't be too matter of fact, right? Which leads to the saying versus conveying. Like, you could say I've been in business for 10 years, and I'm located on the north side of town. That's fact, and it's pretty hard to dispute. But to say people trust me, you need to convey that. So I have over 1,000 clients, and 96% of them have been with me for 10 plus years.
Gotcha.
You're kind of saying the same thing, but in a totally different way, right?
Yep.
So you're conveying information as opposed to just saying it.
So show, don't tell.
Yeah, so saying versus conveying, show, don't tell. I mean, these are things that people have said for a long time.
Right.
And then the last thing that I just wanted to cover real quick is, and I heard this from, I think it was Eugene Schwartz. He was giving a talk at Phillips Publishing back in the day when they were kind of the big information marketer. He said that if you're in marketing of any kind and you're selling to the public, that you should be going out and you should be seeing every movie that does $100 million, or more, because there's something going on with that movie that is connecting with the general public.
I agree.
And a lot of marketers, I see this all the time, a lot of marketers will get on their high horse and they'll think that, my product's above that.
Yeah.
And they start to dismiss human nature. They think that their product doesn't, fall into those categories. They're special. Their audience is different. But the fact is, $1 billion worth of people go see the Avengers. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
I love the movies, but so what's going on there with human nature? Like, what are people trying to escape from? What are they drawn to? The heroes, the good versus evil, like whatever. And how can you, maybe not directly, sometimes directly, you and I both follow Ben Settle, and he would probably tie directly into those kind of movies and things. Other ways you can kind of play off of them. But the fact is, we could get into quantum physics and other stuff going on too about whenever there's a dominant kind of thought going on in the world at the time, you could tap into that and it's going to be more powerful. Christmas season, a lot of people shut down businesses, which is stupid because I worked for a company in Dallas, Texas, back when I was selling financial stuff. And our biggest week of the year, every year, was the week between Christmas and New Year's. Like, nobody was allowed to take a vacation.
Right.
Everybody had to report. Right. We ran twice as many appointments. Everybody was home. There was no competition. Nobody else was knocking on doors, going to in-home appointments. People were bored out of their mind because they'd been with their family for, 3 or 4 days.
Yeah. Ready to get out of the house.
And they've been in a buying mood for the last month and a half. And you can tap into all those things if you slow down enough to realize what's going on in the world. And that's kind of the last thing he talks about is that I forgot what he's learning from the masters in his book. The masters are entertainment. Yeah, the entertainment industry. Yeah, like they have done a better job of tapping into the emotions and planting their thoughts and their ideas and their values for good or for for good or worse, into the public.
Yeah.
So if you can learn to do that for your product in your niche,
absolutely,
you can absolutely own it.
We could do a whole segment on Marvel versus DC, success versus failure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like, why is this group doing so well and this one?
This is gone. This is gone in the ground, man. I mean, yeah.
Because the story architecture is the same.
Yeah.
But it's in the, and that's how this is, right? There's the technique and tactic of production, and there's understanding the principles, and then applying the tactics on top of the principles instead of just trying the tactics,
right? With
no understanding of why they work.
Yeah.
So that'd be a fun show to do. We'll have to wait for the next Marvel launch, which I think is going to be as we're recording this. I guess Captain Marvel would be the next.
Captain
Marvel, which is.
We've had Venom. Of course, that's not necessarily a Marvel franchise flick.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Even though it is Marvel, it falls under Sony.
Yeah, it'll come
they
out.
Have the rights.
Yeah, it doesn't have that same gravitas as the Avengers people. So but it'll be interesting to see how Captain Marvel does. We'll have to see. How that, it sounds corny right now, but I think like all the other ones, it'll work. And
it fascinates me. Just talking about movies. And, we could spend an entire segment on what causes, why some movies are just complete big screen hits, that just go off the rail.
Yeah, why don't we do that? Why don't we make the next episode? But I've got actually, I saw a segment on CBS Sunday Morning this week about movies that I think would be fascinating to people.
All right.
And it blew my mind when I saw it.
No.
And I keep up with a lot of that stuff, but I'll leave that as a cliffhanger. And
now you know.
There's one guy in the movie industry right now that is just crushing it, and he's behind a certain type of movie that is very, very successful. So we'll dive into that and then other types of movies on the next episode.
And Persuasion. I like it. I like it a lot.
All right.
With that said, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Again, you can find us always at Persuasion by the Pint. Again, we'll have links, as we've mentioned previously, we'll have links to the report, and you can check out our beer of the week, Harpoon Dunkin' Coffee Porter.
Yep.
Which I give it a thumbs up. It's good.
I think it's good.
Yeah.
I liked it.
If you're a big coffee fan and
if
you're
you
a beer
like coffee,
fan,
you'll love it.
Yeah, you'll like this. It's good.
The first sip is a little shock because you're drinking a beer and you get coffee, but after that, it kind of settles in.
So our system doesn't know whether we should be wired or we should be kind of like relaxed. We're kind of.
It's a great beer for 10 in the morning.
Yeah, exactly. Midday. Hey, thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time. Again, Sean McCool, Jonathan Taylor, persuasionbythepint.com. Persuasionbythepint.com. Thanks.